Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of the country's biggest stars, some of our favourite legends, and we're talking to Sandy Newman today from Marmalade. He's back on tour with this wonderful show. It's called 60's Gold. It will be touring all over the UK. We'll give you the tour dates in a bit. I'm delighted to say that Sandy's on the line now. How are you doing?
I'm all right, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm not bad, but not as good as you. I mean, I read your life and I read your CV and your career and what you've been up to. I mean, it's been remarkable and sexy. Life on the road, I mean, aside from the travelling, is really good, isn't it?
Well, it hasn't been bad to me, I have to be honest, you know. It's been reasonable, but, you know, when you start out in any form of career, you like to think that you can do what you want to do in life, you know. And I've been fortunate to be able to. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Some people say, "Well, you've never had a proper job," but believe me, there's a work involved as well. Of course, there is.
At what point did you know that you were good enough to turn this from a hobby into an occupation?
Well, again, I was very fortunate. I was actually performing whilst still at school. I was very young at the game, and I was in a very reasonable band at the age of 15, 16 in Glasgow. And all the guys who were senior to me in the band, it was actually the drummer who turned me on to the whole Dean Ford and the Gaylords Marmalade thing, funnily enough. And then when I left school, supposedly as a trainee industrial chemist, that was what was on the map for me, education-wise. I was still playing, you know, so I was then offered a job in a very professional band who were kind of second to Dean Ford and the Gaylords, a band called the Chris McClure section. He had been, Chris McClure himself had been one of the first artists in Scotland to be on the kind of first pop show in Scotland, which was called Stramash and BBC television, you know. So I was a sort of replacement in the band for one of the original guitar players as the young blood, as I was called. And, you know, immediately started doing, you know, but in these days it was, you were rehearsing 2-3 days a week and you were on the road. If you weren't working 4 or 5 nights a week, you were quiet, you know. That was how, so that was professional, right? Almost from the word go.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you look at your career from the inside and I look at it from the outside, so astounding. And I think survival is the biggest compliment I can pay you, the fact you're still here and you're still doing it. So few survive the business, do they? It's just the way it is.
Well, it very much is like that, Alex. I consider myself very fortunate. I've tried to remain quite grounded most of the time. And, you know, I was married young, have children. They're now adults, obviously. And that's kind of helped keep me grounded. You know, I was the youngest of 4 anyway, so it was very much a family thing in these days, you know.
How hedonistic were the 60s? I mean, I'm only 40 years old, so of course I missed it by 2 decades. But I hear two sides of it. There are those who sort of were completely unaware of it, and then those who indulged in it. Was it fun to be in show business at that point? I mean, 69 was probably your biggest year musically when you broke with Obla Di Obla Da. Am I right in saying that?
The band, yeah, absolutely, the original band. That was a big step because it was the first Scottish band ever to have a number 1 record. You know, so it validated the reason for leaving Scotland and making a go of it down south. You know, so that really was a big part of the whole thing. You know, but you know, there was, as you say, there were 2 sides to it. Obviously, on the road, the famous tales that make it through are normally the ones at television screens getting thrown through windows and stuff like that. All the nonsense. But that was high end. I mean, I have to be perfectly honest and say that I was never really involved in anything quite as drastic as that. There was several water fights in corridors in these days with fire hydrants and all sorts of we did get charged in Germany a couple of times for shrunken carpets and hallways and things like that.
You're back in 2019 doing 60's Gold, which is putting you back on the road with Herman's Hermits and the Mersey Beats, Wayne Fontana, and of course Love Affair, which will be a fabulous show. I mean, just to hear that sound with the guitars and that PA pumping out these tunes again. I mean, I wonder what it was like back some 5-6 decades ago when you were doing it the first time with these people. I mean, it must have been magical to walk in a building and not knowing whether you were going to meet the Beatles one minute or Herman's Hermits the next. I mean, the people that you were able to associate with without even knowing their long-term legacy must have been incredible.
Well, yeah, but you stumbled on people. You did. The reverence was mainly. I mean, the Beatles were the ones that everybody revered. The Beatles, they were very much high in most people's esteem, unless they were out and out blues addicts. So, no, I don't want any of that pop nonsense. Mm-hmm. But they like or dislike, there was such a huge influence they had on the whole music scene. And some of the early, bands like the Searchers. I mean, I saw the Searchers as a youngster. Really in the Barrowland Ballroom, and it just blew me away. It was one these kind of feelings in these early television shows. The Empire Pool, Wembley. There was an annual show, and you would look at it on the television, black and white television. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Searchers, the Who, the Hollies. The list went on forever.
Yeah,
and this was just.
And have you worked out why skiffle seemed to be so influential in the 60s sound? It all seemed to sort of come from that, didn't it?
Well, I think it simply, in many ways, Alex, it made it more accessible. I mean, it's not something that I really, really had. Again, for me, that was secondhand because I saw it happening with my older brother. Mm. There was always music around our family. I was the youngest. My brother was a violin player, so I was a violin player. You tended to follow. I tended to follow in his footsteps, and he brought guitar into the house, and that was when the skiffle was going on. Mm. And then I would be a little boy, being in the way sometimes, but allowed to sit in the front room when they had the rehearsals, and my mother would be making the cups of tea and scones to bring into the boys whilst they got the old string bass and just G-chest bass, all the nonsense going on. And it was very, very inspiring and exciting for me. But I think the skiffle thing made music much more accessible to people. They didn't have to have sophisticated knowledge. They had to have a sense of rhythm, sure, but, most people do. So, as they say, anyone can dance if they're taught properly.
Incredible. And tell me about coming down south and working London and places like that. Were you nervous? Because the distance is significant. It's almost another world. I'm from the north. You're from up there. How did it feel coming down and sort of entertaining London audiences? Did you worry that they'd get it?
Very apprehensive about the whole thing, It was, you were conscious of being potentially viewed as some colloquial nonsense, and your imagery of what was happening in these early 60s days was everything seemed to centre around London. Everything you read in the papers was all London. The Beatles ran around London, and speakeasies and the Marquee Club, and everything seemed to generate from there. So when you performed in England, you felt a little apprehensive about the whole deal. But, very quickly, an audience is an audience. And, I think more craft was learned about performing in these days. I mean, musicians today, you can get some fabulous young musicians because they're coming from a different level of learning, They can go on YouTube, they can look at videos, they can look at, that song, how do we play that? That's the chords, that's the thing. We didn't quite have that way, It was, you would have to go to the music shop and maybe if you could afford it, you'd maybe buy the music, which was written in piano keys, and songs that were in the key of G were written in E flat, and that was you'd look at it and you go, I don't quite get that. But then you try and retain it. I'm speaking personally, you try and retain some stuff in your memory because you couldn't. Sheet music was 3 and 6, as I remember.
Yeah, it's about £6 a piece these days, isn't it?
If you're a schoolboy, reliant on pocket money, it was a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah. And what's it like recreating them today? I mean, they're the same songs, I presume in the same key with the same arrangements because we want to hear them as we remember them. Is it still as thrilling?
Well, yes, it is actually, because some people regard, you've been doing this all your life, you play these songs every night when you perform, but the whole point is there's a chemistry between the people on a stage and the people in an audience, irrespective of what it is you're performing. And if the chemistry is good, it's because they're reacting to what you're doing. So you're performing the songs. Of course, there's a huge nostalgia involved. It is the 60s. The audiences are the audiences, but there's a mixed audience now, Alex. It's not just people who were around in the 60s. It's families, second, third generations, because the music has survived. And the music always seems to have inspired even new artists. They'll check out all these old things from the 60s and find out things that inspire them.
Well, I was talking to a DJ the other day from up north, and apparently BBC local radio now have banned songs from the 60s. They think it's too passé and too old and people don't want it. And as a guy who's about to turn 40, I couldn't disagree more. I think when you hear a great 60s song, whether it's Ronettes, whether it's You, whether it's one of the classics, obviously Stones or Beatles, the fun of hearing those songs is just as rich as it was back then. I think it's a great mistake to throw this stuff away, and I'm sure it will come back and they'll realise their mistake, because we still love hearing these songs just because of the majesty of it, really, more than anything.
Well, that's nice to hear. It's nice to hear, but I can't help but agree with you, because even television, even adverts, without even knowing, I couldn't tell you what it's for, but I hear it constantly on television channels. You really got me.
Yeah, of course.
Because, it's like, as soon as you hear that opening rhyme,
it's beautiful.
Off you go. It just works. It doesn't just capture that era, it captures everything.
This tour is called Gold, and you start September 27th at Eastleigh at the Concord Club, 28th at Torquay, Princess Theatre. 29th, you go to Dartford, October 2nd at Wickham Swan. At the 4th, you'll be at Stevenage, 5th in Southend, 6th St Albans, 9th Croydon, 10th Folkestone, 16th at Swansea, 17th Cardiff, 18th at Cheltenham, and the tour continues right through, and will continue forever, because we're going to want to hear these songs, aren't we, back to back. We'll always go to a 60s concert purely to see the legends like you recreate your music, but just to hear these songs, they're fabulous.
Yeah, that's great. That's nice to hear, as I say, Alex. Thank you very much.
Not at all. You can see Hermit's Hermits, you can see the Mersey Beats, Marmalade, and Wayne Fontana, and the Mindbenders in 60s Gold, the 2019 tour. Google the dates, and really lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time, Sandy.
Thank you very much, Alex.